What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Masculine Health Solutions podcast, where I am joined by Amy Reiley, who's going to give us a little bit of a lowdown on some we might want to learn a little bit more, and that's aphrodisiac foods, things that make it feel a little bit sensual, when you're about to get down, and how certain foods can affect you positively, and how foods might just be messing you up in the bedroom. But first and foremost, Amy, how are you?
Hi, how are you? It's so great to be here.
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, and that's kind of the thing is, as you reached out to me and decided that you wanted to have this conversation, I love diving into the subject because I think it's something that's truly intriguing and something that I think a lot of guys and a lot of people kind of just say, hey, you know what, that can't really affect me positively in the bedroom, right? I mean, at McDonald's isn't really all that bad, is it?
I mean, you are what you eat.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Exactly. But I kind of want to get a little bit more about your background and what got you
Mhm.
started into this, right? Because you kind of had that, background involved with gastronomy and all that good stuff. But
Mhm.
then how did this kind of begin for you?
So as you mentioned, yeah, I have my master's degree in gastronomy from Le Cordon Bleu, which basically means that I have studied everything about food except the cooking part. Although we had to study that too. So I have that background too. Um, but I, so as far as like the aphrodisiac foods, I became interested in the health side of food and how food affects your body. When in my early 20s, I got really sick
Oh, wow.
and I kept losing weight and food just like it never felt good. I was never had any energy. I didn't want to eat. And I finally figured out that I had a systemic yeast infection as well as a severe mold allergy. It was like the least sexy thing you could have. But the treatment for it was almost all diet changes. And I had to go on a very restrictive, very horrible diet that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. But but the effects were amazing. Within weeks, I felt like a different person. And it was life changing for me. It was like to know how much what you put in your body affects every minute of every day that way, and how you can make these positive changes by making great food choices. It was really exciting to me. And so I still had that in my head. I mean, to be honest, I was working as a wine writer. And when I went into the Cordon Bleu program, I thought that that's where I was going to stay focused. But I fell in love with the topic of aphrodisiacs. I saw how it could combine everything that I was interested in, this interest in health, this interest in showing people how what you eat has this greater impact on your body, as well as it also, it incorporates wine and it incorporates history. And so I was really drawn to the topic. I started studying it while I was at Cordon Bleu right after I graduated. No, I think I was still working on my dissertation. I got a call from a gentleman writing a story for National Geographic. And he said, I'm looking to speak with Amy Reiley. I understand she's a leading authority on aphrodisiac foods. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's me. Right. And, and it was printed that way in National Geographic, and the career kind of took off from there. I've since written 5 aphrodisiac cookbooks. I've been doing this for over 20 years. So you never know.
Yeah. Well, I guess that background is I think sometimes that life steers us in directions that we can't really control at times. And then sometimes I feel it's almost like maybe there's a higher power that's like, well, you're going to fall in love with this in a way that you may never have thought of. But it's like,
Yep.
okay, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this now, it's kind of
Right.
like,
Right.
even on this podcast where I'm talking to urologists and about, different types of, health as we get older, as men and just kind of the overall scope of things. Cause I think you have to be open to that curiosity. It's almost like you open Pandora's box and now you want to see what else is out there. Right. And I think that's
Right.
probably what
Right.
happened to you,
Yeah.
or in a way.
Yeah, and it's funny. I have a lot of urologists who are fans,
I could imagine. Yeah. It makes sense.
and some of them who have said things like, well, you're right, if people would just drink more water, I'd probably have less patients. If people would learn how to eat, some of them would not need any of these medications.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big thing too. Cause I find, another discussion that I was having where I was talking to a doctor about that, and he was talking about trying to get everybody on a continuous glucose monitor for that reason. He's like, this isn't just for diabetics. It's like we have to know what we're consuming and how we're consuming it and how it's affecting us as individuals. Because somebody may eat a casserole and, it doesn't affect them at all, or somebody else has it and they got a massive sugar spike, right? And the glucose in the body just elevates and blood sugar is there.
We're all very different. I recently completed, it's kind of like, what, about time. I recently completed my nutrition coaching certification. And
Nice.
really, I mean, the majority of what we were talking about in the course was, looking at the individual and guiding each person, because it's going to be a different answer for each one. And that's why things like nutrition coaching is vital, because it's our bodies all have a completely different experience from one another. So, yeah.
100%, 100%. But bringing it back to the aphrodisiac side of things, what was one of the first foods that you said, wow, this truly is something that could impact people positively in the sensual side of things? What was one of those first foods that really opened your
Ooh.
minds to like how all this, I guess, kind of shifted your perspective?
I mean, I guess I was late to the party with oysters. I was probably in my late. I mean, for someone who's in the food business, to have not had an oyster to maybe my mid to late 20s was kind of unusual. And definitely, I like everyone else. It's like, oh, that tired cliche, but yeah, you have an oyster and you get it like, oh, it's a sexy food, right? It
Hmm.
really is. That and the other one I think would be coffee.
Really?
Yeah, well, especially when you're on a restrictive diet and you're not having many things and you haven't had coffee for a little while, and then you have it, and then you're like, whoa, I feel all sorts of things besides awake.
Note to self. I mean, I am a coffee addict. As you can see, it's one of those things that I probably consume like a liter a day. I can't live without my coffee. It's from
Wow.
my Costa Rican genetics. It's probably something that's in us since we were like little kids, it's like I just love coffee. So note to self, I'll tell my wife that.
Yeah.
And is there like a part of the chemical makeup, let's say, of oysters? Because I've always read about it's high in zinc. Are there certain vitamins and minerals and nutrients that you find that, hey, foods that are relatively high in zinc, like I heard pumpkin seeds is another one as well.
Right.
Are there certain, nutrients, minerals, and vitamins that are usually those contributing factors to making, foods more aphrodisiac than others?
So, yes. I mean, so historically, foods have been thought of as aphrodisiac since basically as far as we know, possibly before recorded time, right? And
Hmm.
people didn't understand these things. They just knew that this food had some kind of effect. And let's look at, most historically, most cultures, people were starving. Like there wasn't
Yeah.
enough food. They were wasting food like we are today. And so if they were noticing some kind of effect from their food, then there's probably some validity. And now today we can look at those foods and say, well, it's high in X, Y, and Z, and that's going to support either testosterone production or, some sexual hormone
Hmm.
production or your energy levels, or even foods that are high in fiber will
Interesting.
contribute to your sex life. And any food that's labeled as heart healthy
Yeah.
is also vital to your sex life. So yeah.
That's super interesting because I mean, the thing is, it's that correlation too. What I find is that the body is global, and you can't really improve one thing without improving other things, right? And I've had conversations with guys who are just like, "Hey, you know what? I'm trying to improve like my penile health. My erections are kind of suffering." And then I ask them about like, "Well, what are you doing?" They're like, "I'm drinking every day." Well, I'm like, "Well, that's not good." It's like, it's just gonna affect me. Well, it's only gonna give me like a beer gut, right? Like it's not. I'm like, no, it's a global thing. Like the body doesn't just work. It's almost like, hey, you got a beautiful symphony, and then you throw in some cacophonous, horrible noise out there in the corner, and it's just gonna ruin things because the body is a symphony. It's got to work together, and you can't really say, one thing is gonna affect everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. And it's funny because people will be like, but no, that's a heart health food. And I'm like, well, why is it a heart health food? It's because it improves blood flow, right? For,
Yep.
whatever way it removes plaque, or whichever way that it's improving your blood flow. Well, gee, what else do you think that'll do for you besides, your,
Exactly. Yep.
yeah.
And is there a specific so I guess I kind of want to divide this question in a couple of different ways, but I want to start off more like long-term health, let's say, for somebody that is suffering maybe like from a sexual standpoint, like let's say a guy, what would you have them kind of put into their daily diet and nutrition? Like what's something where you're like, okay, you know what, we're going to switch this up and we're going to add this to your daily intake. What would it kind of look like as far as like a protocol for somebody that's, mid 40s looking to improve themselves, kind of stuff? Well, maybe not like destroyed, but somebody that needs to
Yeah.
improve some things. What would that kind of look like?
So, I mean, it is, as I said, it's all individual. And part of what I would say is try these things, but pay attention to what works for you.
Mhm.
So there has to be this sort of mindfulness, I guess we'd call it, component to it, whatever you do. But I've created this list of the 10 best foods for men. And that's where I would tell everyone to start. Start with incorporating more of these foods. And they're all, healthy, natural foods. Incorporate more of these foods into your diet. And you'll find some are right for you and some aren't. Of course, not everyone. If you dislike or you have an allergy or an intolerance, obviously don't skip that food. There are other things
Yeah, that makes sense.
instead, right? Because I've had people be like, oh, I think I have an intolerance, but she said eat it. I'm like, no, don't do that.
That's a bad idea. It's like, well, things are
Right.
working fine, but I'm almost dead.
Yeah,
That'd be awful.
don't. It's not an all or nothing. It really
Yeah.
isn't. But yes, I would start with the 10 best foods for men and then go from there and see which of those, and then maybe look at why. So I last year I came out with a new book, which is also sort of it's also a system, I would guess I would call it,
Hmm.
for men. It's called the Better Sex Bundle for Men. And I have a book in there that highlights these 10 foods and talks about the reasons and substitutions if these aren't the right foods for you, but helps you understand what each of these foods are doing.
Gotcha.
And so, you'll understand, well, the foods that are doing this and this are working for me, and maybe the others aren't, as well as recipes, of course. But then I added in the other components. Well, keep a diary so you know. And my diary is very simple. It's like, did I change my medication? It's a bit like more check boxes. Did I change my medications? How much sleep did I get? How often did I have sex? Like,
Hmm.
to see where things are different for you. So, because it's not just about those foods. It's those foods in collaboration with whatever medication, prescription or over-the-counter medications you're taking. If you have some kind of personal health practice, if you meditate or whatever, and if you skip it for a week, what does that do for you? Or you try meditation, what does that do for you? Did you get the exercise that you're used to getting? Did you get the exercise your doctor told you to get?
Hmm.
It all, it's all going to come together in one beautiful package. And if you track all of that, you'll see for yourself what is actually working for you. Because maybe you don't need 2 hours of exercise, but you do need to get 8 hours of sleep, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I like that multi-pronged um, protocol, I guess you could call it, because it again, us guys, sometimes we think like, and I think society as a whole will usually band-aid different
Mhm.
symptoms that we may have, and we're like, well, you know what, I'm just gonna take beet juice and I'll be good to go because I'm taking
Yeah.
Viagra and this, that, and the other, and it's kind of like, okay, cool, but you're sleeping 3 hours a night, and I'm guilty as sin for that because I struggle with my sleep a lot, so that's one of those things where I need to work on that.
Right.
And the older you get, the more you're like, okay, things aren't moving the way that they should have, or they should. When I'm at the gym, I feel a little bit more like a little bit, I don't know, creaky in the joints and stuff sometimes. So, I think I'm in the same boat as a lot of guys my age where we're starting to realize it's okay, that recovery stuff, it is important, more important than it was when I was in my 20s, right? Where I'm kind of starting to see that difference, right?
Right.
And I feel that it's super important now that you bring it up as well as far as like meditation and sleep and all that. I,
Mhm.
I like that because it's not just focusing on solely just the food to fix the issues, which I think is something that's very, very important.
Yes, for sure. And but the other important part of that is you're then becoming your own advocate, right? You
Hmm.
are tracking what is right for you. And you can then definitively say, yes, no, these are not the right things for me. And you know it. So
Hmm.
it's really important that we kind of become self-aware and self-advocate for our health in that way.
A hundred
Yeah.
percent.
And then the other piece of it is the planning, right? So if you are going to change your diet and add these things, then you need to add them to your shopping list. You need to check off, when did I have these foods today? Yes, I did. No, I didn't. right? Is to hold
Yeah.
yourself a little bit accountable. So yeah, so my approach to it is kind of three parts. Like, here are the foods, here's how to, and how to incorporate them. Here's how to add it into your whole life practice, and let's really track what's going on. And then, of course, but let's plan it. Let's plan it out so that it makes sense and you can hold yourself accountable for it.
Yeah. And that accountability piece, I think, is the most important because what good is it to have the best plan in the world if you don't hold yourself accountable to what's actually supposed to be done?
Yeah.
Because there's certain people that I even work with where it's like, okay, we got the planning done, everything's good to go, do it for about 2-3 days, and all of a sudden it's like, meh, and they kind of give up. I'm like, no, we got to do this in the long term, and something that's going to take more time. We have to continue dedicating at least a month, and then you build on that foundation, you build on it, and obviously you can take your performance to the next level. However, like you said, you have to hold yourself accountable, right? So
Right.
can't really get past that.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Since I got my coaching certification, I decided I would open up to my email newsletter group. I would open up the opportunity to do one-on-one coaching with me. And then there's the one plan, which is, I call it 30 minutes to a better sex life, where you just fill out a questionnaire, give me your diet journal, and I give you your feedback quick. That's for people who know they can have that accountability piece in place. For the people who don't, I realized after trial and error with, all my friends were guinea pigs. I was like, it's a month. It's a 1 month. You need to do a 1 month coaching program to make it stick. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's awesome because usually it's around that time that people will start to make that shift almost. It's like the paradigm shift that needs to occur in order for them to actually continue down that road in the long term. Like, if you don't have that, and it's almost traumatic, because I know everybody's resistant to change, including myself.
Right.
Like, when I'm learning something, it's always those first 30 days where I'm like, oh, I should just give up. This is dumb. And then after 30 days, it's almost like, oh, it becomes like a habit, and then it becomes really easy and it flows.
It's a change in your habit pattern for sure. Yeah.
100%. And that's kind of where I love that, because having that approach now forces them to really hold themselves accountable. And the best part about it too, it's like, now you get the results, it's like, just listen,
Right.
just do it.
Yes.
And it leads to that. But the other thing now, kind of flipping things, I guess, a little bit, into a different direction now. What are some of the worst foods that a man can consume that are just going to derail him completely?
I mean, so obviously things that are, fast foods, things that are loaded, that are processed, loaded with sodium, those kind of things are always, they're just bad for your overall health, right?
Yeah.
Clearly. I think it's funny. You mentioned beer, which always goes on my list of like things not to have on a romantic evening. Beer is not for date night. And it's because it's not only, it's just there, it's not because I have anything against beer, but it's really not it can be bloating. It can make you, you don't want to be gassy on date night, as well as the fact that it has a negative impact on your sexual health.
Yeah.
It's fine on occasion, but it's one of those that's right up there. And of course, you want to avoid saturated fat, not entirely, but like, not, choose a lean cut of meat, that kind of thing.
Roger that. When it comes to the beer side of things, I took that out a long time ago, and I found that one of the biggest things you mentioned there was bloating. And I found for myself, like, I think at the time I was probably like 240. I was pretty big and I was drinking a lot. And I was still going to the gym, so I was like, no, I'm just husky right now. It's like, no, you're fat. Just in pure denial. Now the older I get, I'm kind of like trying to maintain 185, 190 and stay healthy with, decent muscle mass to make sure that I feel good. But I found that beer was probably like one of those, and alcohol in general for myself, I didn't see anything positive from it, I guess, is the best way to say it, so I just kind of steered clear from it. However, my question is wine, because I do hear a lot of people say positive things about wine. And that's kind of one thing where I'm like, I'm not really a wine drinker, never really was, because I remember the first time I did drink wine, I drank too much and I had the worst hangover I could.
Oh, no. That can turn you off of anything. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's your take on wine?
So as I mentioned, I started out in the food and wine business as a wine writer. So obviously I am very in favor of wine. I do drink wine just about every day. And there are a lot of benefits. Wine certainly falls, I mean, all alcohol, it falls under the description of aphrodisiac, right? But wine
Nice.
has some benefits. Particularly, it's not necessarily true that white wine doesn't have but the same benefits. People assume it because we talk so much about red wine
Yeah.
having heart health benefits. White has some benefits as well. Interestingly, sparkling wines,
Interesting.
champagne and things like that, they have an additional benefit to potentially supporting brain health. And so you're getting the heart health and the brain health benefits. I happen to really like sparkling wine, so I always love good for my heart and my brain.
Yeah.
It's I hate the word moderation, but you kind of have to use it in this context. And it's
Yeah.
not. It's a really. It's you're better off having your like a glass a day than I'm gonna have a bottle on the weekend. You
Mm,
know.
yeah.
Yes.
I think that makes perfect sense. Plus, the thing is, too, I did creep on your Twitter account, and I'm like,
Oh,
okay. I'm like, I see how it is. Wine it is. You know what
yes.
I mean?
Yes. In fact, I like you with beer. So I'm allergic to hops. So I never developed really a
Okay.
taste for beer. It's very rare that I will ever have a beer. Um, but with hard liquor, I'm sort of starting to feel the feelings that you did with beer, where it's like, oh, that just doesn't agree with me any longer, and it
Yeah.
makes me slow. And so it's very rare that I will have hard liquor at all any longer. Usually I have to do a lot of cocktail recipes sometimes for consulting jobs and things. So when I'm working on a cocktail, that's probably about the only time I have it anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what does that cocktail kind of look like? Out of curiosity's sake, I want to see if I can try it on my wife.
Oh, no. Well, I develop. So sometimes as a part, if I'll do a romance package for a hotel or something, I
Interesting.
will develop a cocktail to go with it. So you'll find some on my website, Eat Something Sexy. You'll find some of my cocktails there.
Interesting.
I actually lately I've been doing more of champagne cocktails.
Interesting.
Still
No,
getting
I
the one.
mean, I think that'd be perfect because I could see that for like, Valentine's night or something. The hotel's like, all right, cool. Break the
Yeah.
oysters, the wine, all that good stuff. And why not? And that kind of brings me to another question I did have here. And was waiting a little while for this one, but you mentioned it before. And I was thinking about it, as I was thinking about this podcast, but it's date night, right? You're going out. You're going out to the town. Things are gonna go hot and heavy later on. What would the perfect meal kind of look like on said date night? When you're going to the restaurant, or even if you're gonna prepare, at home. What does
No,
that kind of look
yeah.
like?
No, I have so much experience in guiding this one because sometimes I will consult for chefs like on a Valentine menu. And everyone's inclination is to do exactly the opposite of what I would suggest. They usually want something indulgent, right? And so it's
Mm-hmm.
like a big, like a Wagyu steak, something really fancy, and some giant dessert for two or whatever. No, 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 no. Not that you should skip dessert. But perhaps a lighter meal. First of all, you absolutely want to go for a lighter meal. Avoid the pastas, avoid
Mm,
maybe avoid like the red meats, or if you have them, choose something that's a small portion or lean. So fish is always a good choice. um
interesting.
yeah. I know vegetarian options are often uh more energizing foods. So the problem is that when you have red meat like a big steak or a lamb shank, like what do you feel like doing afterward?
Sleeping.
So avoid any of those foods. The big plate of pasta that makes you want to go to sleep. That gnocchi may be the best in the world, but you're not getting it on after that. And I always suggest ending the meal, maybe split a dessert, maybe something like flourless chocolate cake, something that's a little less
Interesting.
sweet, a little less heavy, and have some coffee. Because as I led with the coffee
Mm-hmm.
is always a good prelude to the bedroom.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess at nighttime, would you recommend would decaf coffee have the same effects as a normal coffee?
Yeah, not really.
Oh, okay, okay.
Is considered like a digestive, like it will help your body digest that chocolate cake. So in that way, it's kind of great. And if you like that pairing, personally, I just like the pairing of coffee with like rich chocolatey things.
Oh
So,
yeah.
it'll make you feel good. It'll make your taste buds happy. But no, coffee, um, the caffeine in coffee, of course, it gives you that energy spark. It's also known to elevate mood. So it
Okay.
improves your mood and it gives you like energy right at that right moment. The only problem is that if you're one of the people who are really sensitive to coffee, you're gonna be up all night. But
Yeah.
that's the price you pay for good sex, I guess. I don't
Yeah, I mean, one thing leads to another. You're gonna need that energy, so hopefully you're drained as soon as you're done.
help. Yes, exactly.
And what about spinach and folates? Because I've heard a lot about like green leafy vegetables and cruciferous vegetables. Are there any in particular that you would recommend as well?
All the dark green leafy vegetables are fantastic for everyone, particularly for women. I also have a list of the 10 best foods for women, and kale is on that list.
Interesting.
So yeah, no, dark leafy greens are great. I just usually try to lead with the foods that are more fun. Because
Yeah.
this lady's telling us all we need to eat more kale and drink more water. This is not the diet I want to be on. Yeah.
Yeah. I could see why that would be kind of, well, it would appear to be unsexy at first, but if it's helpful and you're getting
Right.
it on
Yeah.
and it's helping with
Absolutely.
blood flow,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of guys are willing to make that sacrifice to get a little bit of kale, get a little bit of that stuff. And I mean, why not?
And the dark leafy greens are really easy to just mix into other things. Throw them in soup, blend them into a smoothie. They are easy to, I don't want to say hide, but they're easy to get without having to like sit there and eat a bowl of green stuff.
Yeah. And my other question too, because I was gonna ask you about smoothies too, like as far as preparation kind of goes, because people do talk about how like sometimes it's the fiber that really helps, the body digest these foods and absorb everything as far as the micronutrient profile kind of goes. But if you do make a smoothie, will it have the same effects for the most part, or is the way that we
Oh yeah,
process it any
absolutely.
different?
Definitely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Smoothies are great. I have one every morning.
Well, it's good to know. And another thing that I also thought about was like as far as dressings go, because I did see here that you had, the cookbook, the Chile Aphrodisio, or that's the one that you were, and I kind of want to dive more into that because I've heard about capsaicin, about how the spicy foods really do help to, get things spicy. So, is
Yeah.
there any
Yeah.
that in particular that you prefer, or anything that you could recommend as far as like I don't know, like a vinaigrette or something that you put on your food as well?
Oh wow. Yeah, so just to touch on, so chilies are amazing. If you like heat, chilies
Yeah.
are amazing. They are good for you. In general, they have a lot of um nutritional components that promote sexual health. So they're wonderful. But they are particularly good on date night
Okay.
to enjoy together because they raise your body temperature. So you're a little more ready to tear off your clothes, right? And they also they make your tongue tingle. Everything about them, they kind of make your cheeks flush. They just kind of get you in that sort of, they kind of push you into the mood before you even know it. And of course, if you eat enough
Interesting.
of them, which I will never get to that point, you can even get that endorphin rush that almost runs
Interesting.
high from eating chilies, and you just feel invincible, and so they can be really wonderful for date night. As for what to do with them, in one of my books, I created a chili rub. That's always a great way to use chilies. So, that's simple. Um, I've never used chilies in a vinaigrette, to be honest, but I like that idea.
Yeah.
One of the things, ginger has a lot of the same effects, and I really love ginger because it also has, benefits to the digestive system. But what I like to do with ginger is just make ginger juice, which is like a
Oh,
smoothie without the smoothie. So water,
interesting.
ginger, and a little bit of honey or agave to sweeten it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because I've seen that. Like, I like drinking kombuchas every now and again. It's always like the ginger and hibiscus mix.
Oh,
And
delicious.
that's one that, exists. It's strong, but I always feel like, okay, this one kind of like, it almost feels like it clears me out at the same time. And it's
Mm.
almost like there's another one too that's a ginger and a spice blend. So that one's just like pure,
Oh,
like, that
wow.
one, yeah, warms you up.
Yeah. Fast. Yeah.
Yeah, so that one really has that kick to it. And the reason why I was kind of thinking, I guess another way to look at it is like as far as like the capsaicin, almost maybe not the vinaigrette, but there's a very interesting. It's like a Thai sauce, and the reason why I bring it up is that I love it. It's like a combination of like oil, and it's got the chili flakes mixed into it,
Mm.
and I saw they almost use it not like a vinaigrette per se, but I guess if you could change the texture of it, you could use it as a vinaigrette, it'd be a spicy salad. But hey, why
That'd
not?
be well, sounds like a really spicy vinaigrette, but yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's
Or
kind of like the different
with
flakes.
just with over your grilled vegetables or something. Sure.
Yeah, and that's
Sure.
the other thing too. I guess like I didn't even look at it from that perspective, but that you're giving me ideas. I had to write my own cookbook. uh, but definitely that makes a lot of sense, and I guess combining all these different foods is really where that power truly lies. And the other thing that obviously I got to get into here before we go anywhere else because I want to learn more about aphrodisiac, especially if you were one of the co-authors for Eat Cake Naked. I definitely want to, you got to talk more about that subject, Amy, because I want to learn more
Oh
about
my
cake
God.
and
Well, I have a sweet tooth. I have a very serious sweet tooth. And so my co-author on that book happens to have a PhD in forget it's like it's a holistic medicine. She was specifically studying nutrition. She actually started out, this is so crazy. She started out as my intern.
oh
And
wow.
I was so in love with like this whole nutrition for sex thing that she went all the way to her PhD. Um, and so she is an extremely healthy eater and promotes like she'll lead with kale. And
Nice.
I lead with dessert. So we'll do a book together where we can I'll be the taste monitor. I'm going to come up with Tasty Delicious, and she's going to help incorporate as much health as she can into each of these desserts. And you would never know it. Like for example,
Yeah.
brownies, we make them with chickpea flour. And
Hmm.
so we never know it. The chocolate, there's so much chocolate in them that it completely would cover any sort of chickpea, any note of chickpea in the brownies. But you're
Interesting.
getting you're getting the extra fiber, you're getting the protein, and you're avoiding white flour, which is also great for a lot of people who have issues with that. So yeah, so the whole book, and then it has dark chocolate chunks in it as opposed to just having chocolate. So the whole book, everything in Eat Cake Naked, is all about how can we make something that's delicious and tempting, also benefit your sexual health.
Yeah. And well, combining those two things, I mean, what is one of the favorite desserts or go-tos that you've gotten, or as far as anybody's feedback from the book that said, hey, you know what, this special fudge brownie or this, that, or the other. Well, what's one of those go-tos
And
that a lot of people just
those
like?
brownies that we call them, what do we call them? Love Slave, I think. Love Slave chocolates. They actually have dried cherries in them as well.
Oh,
Cherry chocolate
wow.
brownies. I've heard very good things. I've heard positive things about those. And I've heard a lot of people have given me the feedback that they have switched to using my chocolate cake recipe from the book. They've replaced their chocolate cake recipe, and
Wow.
it incorporates avocados
Oh,
for
wow.
part of the fat instead of oil.
Oh, wow. I never
It
even
makes
thought about that.
it makes a really rich, moist cake. It's delicious. Yeah.
Well, note to self, yeah, because I mean, the thing is, too, that's loaded with fiber. So it's like, wow, that's a
Mhm.
double whammy that I never
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
about.
yeah. So that one, I haven't had anyone say to me, "Oh yeah, that was a sure thing." But I've had a lot of people say to me, "I love this cake recipe," and now I make it all the time.
Well, I mean, that's kind of if you want to know if something's working, when people come up to you and say, "Hey, you know that one recipe or that one thing,
Oh yeah,
I love that."
yeah,
That's kind of like, okay, cool. That's a testament to the
yeah.
fact that number one, you know what you're doing, and number two, it's working, right? Because
Right.
it's
Right.
one of those things. It's the positive feedback that really just confirms exactly what you're going after, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's necessary too, because it's like if not, you're just kind of throwing things out there and you're like, well, I don't know, I hope this works. But no, I mean, people are replacing their chocolate cake recipes for the one that you
Yeah.
just came up with. And I mean, incorporating things like that, I'm like, wow, that's one hell of a difference. My next
Yep.
question though, in regards to because we've been talking more about males, but let's say, I'm taking my wife out for date night and I
Mhm.
kind of wanted to get her in the mood. Is there any substantial or differences in the kind of foods that you should give a woman versus a guy?
So there are, and the things that I really, in terms of like seducing someone,
Kind of, yeah.
in terms of just not like eating for sexual health, but in terms of
Hmm.
seducing someone, the majority of things that I recommend would work for both people. Like when we
Interesting.
talk about coffee or ginger, right? That would work
Yeah.
on either sex. There are some studies that they're a little weird and controversial, but there's got to be some truth to them. Certain aromas,
Interesting.
certain aromas turn women on versus men. So, for example, truffles, and that the scent of truffles turns women on. And of course, historically, it was female pigs that were truffle hunters because they got turned on by the scent of truffles. Male pigs
What?
didn't care. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Talk about digging
Yeah.
that up. That's very interesting because I have heard about lavender being more effective on females as well versus the guys.
Oh, interesting. I had not heard that one. I mostly use lavender for relaxation. I mean, I know that it has its aphrodisiac properties, but I find that, and for some people, that actually the relaxation can be an aphrodisiac property. Uh,
Yeah, it's kind of like, kicking in because that's one of the, I forgot who I was talking to about this. I think they were on the podcast for like, yeah, you really want to get laid tonight, buddy? Then go do the dishes, go clean up. And I'm like, man, this is horrible advice, but it worked. So it's kind of like that whole relaxation is a precursor and almost like a
yeah,
form of foreplay, right? So
yeah.
it's kind of like combining those different things with the aromas and the foods and all that as well. I guess just kind of all kind of, I guess, coexist to help you out, to get to the end goal. But I mean, if your woman's stressed out, good luck.
Mhm. Yes, that is true.
So
Though, it
100%.
could have just been the fact that you did the dishes.
Maybe, I think, it's probably a big one. And what about teas and stuff as well? Like as far as different things that you can drink, because we touched on coffee, and I mean that's a definite. That one's going in my book like for forever, so I can justify my coffee addiction. But what about teas on the flip side of things?
Absolutely. I mean, green tea, the antioxidants in green tea, 100% support your sex life. So if you're a green tea drinker, congratulations. Um,
Perfect.
so yes, for sure that, that's very valuable. And of course there are other teas, there's ginger tea as well. And lavender tea. So yeah,
No,
there's a lot of ways you can go with that too.
interesting. And in regards to like some of the books that you've already written, what's the direction that you kind of want to take in the near future here, as far as like your ventures and what it is that you're working on? What's something that you're currently working on as far as like projects and books kind of go?
Well, I'm really excited about what I'm working on right now. So I took the Better Sex bundle for men and I am working on building from that into the Better Sex bundle for women. It is
Okay.
just taking me so much longer because women are much more complex. And, and I don't mean emotionally. I mean, our whole hormone system it
Yeah.
changes daily, and it also changes multiple times throughout our lives. Generally, completely changes
Yeah.
multiple times throughout our lives, and so it's hard to write. You can't write the book in the same way as I did for
Hmm.
men, because you have to address all these different points in a life. So, yeah.
So, what's some of the biggest difference you see? Because it's kind of like you're right. It's like the different stages in a female. Plus, I was recently learning about how like the hormonal makeup in a female. Like for guys, it's just always getting old. Give them testosterone now. It's TRT and HRT and different things. But when it comes to women, you kind of got to balance things out a little bit more. But what are some of the biggest changes that you do see versus as we age as males and versus females?
Well, I mean, first of all, a woman changes daily. Every day she wakes up and is a little different than the day prior in a 28-day cycle. So it's just the whole, for throughout your whole life until you hit menopause, that is going on. And so almost, I mean, there are experts out there who will treat women differently almost daily, like in terms of diet and even exercise.
Wow.
Like there are experts on women's health who will prescribe something different and then repeat it, for that 28-day cycle. And then it starts to shift when you hit perimenopause. And then by menopause, then you have to do something completely different.
Wow.
Exhausting to be us.
Yeah, no, the more I learned, I mean, I was there for the childbirth. I was like, oh wow.
No.
I was like, I'm lucky, thank you. Because there's so many different there's so many different things. I mean, multifactorial kind of components to everything in this life. And when it comes to just understanding each other, it's like the older I get, the more I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense in a
Yeah.
way that it shouldn't, but it makes sense, because now it's like it's more of the understanding phase.
Mm.
And I guess it just kind of comes with time. I guess for us guys, we're kind of gets, well, I'll say a little bit more intelligent the older we get, right? And we start to realize these different things and learn these different patterns.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, I guess, like when it comes to females, because with the bundles, so have you divided it into the three different stages of a female's life, or how do you go about,
I haven't
doing that?
figured out exactly how I'm going to do it. I just kind of put the basic information together on because I have the 10 best foods. So I put all of that together. I've kind of put together an outline, and I'm kind of stuck. I really am. I've been stuck for 6 months going, I'm not
Wow.
sure how I approach this because it's so much more complicated. Yeah. Yeah. Because not only are there those stages, but there's also pregnancy.
Yep.
And, for at least 6 months after you've given birth, there's still more adjustment. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I overlooked that, but you're 100% right. Like during pregnancy, everything kind of shifts as well. So it's like another, let's throw, oh gosh, there's so many different wrenches you can throw into the mix, but I guess kind of just making it all make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. I mean, maybe you gotta write three different books, Amy.
Yeah.
One for one stage, two for another stage, and a pregnancy version. Just to make sure everything lines up perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, my goal is really the same as it was with the men's, which is just to show people that making some adjustments to your diet with, delicious natural foods can make you feel great. And so maybe I'm making it too complicated. I don't know. But certainly these things, we do have to address that your hormones are going to be different at these times. And what may feel great, the foods that may feel great today may not tomorrow.
Yeah, and things. Another question that I did have actually in regards to that, like for I guess guys and gals, it's do you see that sometimes your palate starts to shift the older you get?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, definitely.
And what's kind of the most common shift that you see, in your time working with people? What's the most common thing that you kind of see where it's like, okay, they start to go for more bitter foods? Like, what's common?
I've noticed that a lot of people have less interest in sweets, or have
Interesting.
more perceived, they have more perception of sweet. Like sweet is an overwhelming
Mm,
flavor to them. But then of course you get to the point where you hit somewhere, I don't know, in your 70s or 80s or so, I think on average, and you start to taste, and your whole sense of taste starts to diminish at some point.
interesting.
And I'm not sure exactly when that starts, but I know I have observed it happening quite a bit. Yeah.
That's interesting. And would you say when people get older and it starts to diminish that they want stronger foods?
Oh, yeah. A lot of people do. Not all. But a lot of people do want, things with more of a direct punch, flavor punch. Yeah.
Because I could imagine it's almost like, well, I can't really taste all that much. Just load up an entire pepper.
Not sure anyone's taste buds diminish that much, but
Just
yeah.
completely burnt out. But because I bring it up because I think about myself when I was a kid, I hated onions and garlics and
Mm,
mushrooms. Like I couldn't stand
yeah.
it. And now like I just can't get enough. Like I just love eating garlic.
Mm,
Like all three of those things are just some of my favorite foods. And I like to mix it with steak and just kind of go from there.
yeah.
And I just kind of find it interesting because I imagine that a lot of people would probably start shifting in different directions, kind of the older they get and the more you experience
Yeah.
different foods.
Yes.
And I guess the other thing that I was thinking about too, is there a culture or a group of people that you would say, tend to basically, I guess, bang the nail on the head in regards to how they eat, like their everyday practices that you're just like, okay, that's like almost, or a good staple or a good foundation for somebody if they do want to follow some type of diet. What would like that culture's diet kind of look like?
Mm. You know, my answer is going to be, and I would never follow their diet entirely. But it's incredible. Seventh Day Adventists,
What?
at least the ones in Southern California that I have been around, have the most incredible. incredible eating habits. Everything is natural. Well, they're vegetarian.
Wow.
So they eat the full plant-based diet. They don't consume alcohol.
That's a big plus.
And, and they eat, they're not doing processed. They try to avoid. I don't know that it's just culturally, perhaps. I don't think it's part of their religion, but they tend to avoid processed foods.
Interesting.
They're eating natural foods. Often their communities, they're a very sharing community. So someone may take the burden of cooking for several families one day and then another. So you're able to eat more. Those of us who are on the go, like sometimes I'm just like, heat up that frozen mac and cheese, kids, and
Yeah.
you have a culture where all the families support each other, then there's more opportunity to eat well every day. So I think that it's part of their culture and their religious choices, and all of it comes together. They eat the most fantastic diet.
What?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would have never guessed. I would have thought like it'd be Mediterranean or something, but that makes perfect
Mediterranean is
sense.
wonderful. Yeah. I mean, every family I have visited in, say, the south of France or Italy also eats a beautiful, fabulous diet. But it's for the same reason that they are eating natural foods. There's very little processed, and they take pride in creating their meals from scratch and those kind of things. So yes, that too.
I think that's a big factor. The more I read into why we're not digesting our food so well here in North America, like I live in Canada, so it's pretty much the same deal. And a lot of it is just kind of prepackaged, processed,
Yeah.
a lot more
Yeah.
chemicals than I'd like to be consuming, and then I looked into xenoestrogens, microplastics, and I'm like, oh man, like it's tough to get away from it. But unfortunately, it kind of comes with the modern society that we live in. So
Right.
obviously, you just try to do your best, the best that you possibly can. But before you leave today, tell us all about your books, where we can find you, all that good stuff.
Okay. So, wow. The best place to find me is eatsomethingsexy.com. And definitely, if you're interested in the kind of things that I talked about today, if you're interested in my coaching and all of that, sign up for my email list, because that's where I communicate to people about all my upcoming opportunities. Um, you can also find the Better Sex Bundle for Men on eatsomethingsexy.com. And my cookbooks are all available throughout the US and Canada. I know you can get them all on Amazon. I know in the US you can order them from any local bookstore. I believe you can in Canada as well. So there you go.
Probably, yep. Amy, this was an absolute blast. I thank you for coming on. Again, all the links are always in the description, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Until then.